Hello, 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 hello. Welcome, Anomalous America. Back at it. Episode 26. Nebraska. Let me know how I sound. You think I'd have this figured out by now, but my settings always get a little screwy. Greetings, Larry. Vegan Botanicals. JP McNabb. Assy Mix. It's been a while. Good to see you. Thanks for being here. Ugh. All right. As always, thanks for joining me. Lots of material to go through. For those of you that have been following along on X, you've seen a snippet. Lots of good material to get into. But yeah. So catching us back up, what have we done? We've done the review and preview, right? So I did a preview video for Nebraska. We'll read a little snippet of the article just because I'm sure a lot of the people that join us for this today may not have seen the preview video. But really good, really interesting. But yeah, we'll touch on that. So if you haven't seen that, it's about 15 minutes, I think, something around there. A little bit too long of an article to cover the whole thing in this, but there's quite a lot of good long form stuff that hopefully we'll get to here. And then we've also done the review and preview. I'd say about 80% of my viewership now hasn't even seen the first 10 episodes of Anomalous America. So I've just kind of been asked by a few different people to do a quick little review. How do I fit, 5, 6, 10 episodes into 2 hours? That's kind of what my attempt was. I think I only got to 6, maybe 7. I can't remember. Got to Utah. I think that was episode 6. So I'll do a few more of those. Kind of just picking some of my favorites from those longer episodes. Just because it's been over 3 years now, so why not? And it's been so long since I've looked at even some of those states, I've completely forgotten some of the stuff that I've covered. It all blends together. That's kind of the fun thing about this whole process, really, is that it just piecing these episodes together has me reading things that I clipped, sometimes up to over 10 years ago. So it's pretty cool to read through things that I just never thought about sharing or never posted on Twitter or X now or Instagram or anything. And I think that's going to be kind of the fun part about the review and preview stuff for me is trying to do some short form content stuff. For like Instagram and stuff, just, get more people seeing my material, but in a small, there's a lot of articles I have that are just a paragraph and they deserve a lot of attention, but often I stick to the the longer full page articles, and I am long winded, as a lot of you are aware, so it doesn't really appeal to, um, the narrowed, um, viewership window, right? 2 hour videos are probably too long as it is, let alone me reading a article for 15, 20, 30 minutes. But yeah, so what's today? It's Monday. There'll be another review and preview live by the end of the week. So that'll be cool. Kansas, episode 27. Kansas. I haven't posted anything on social media about this. It's probably obvious by now, but a lot of people have been asking, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho. I have so many listeners from Idaho. It's pretty crazy. I think that's probably one of the most requested states, which is mind blowing to me, just by populace, of course. But yeah, I'm going to get Kansas and then Oklahoma done out of the way, just because it feels natural with how I kind of try to uh, follow the Mississippi as I went through the Gulf states, and then we'll make our way back. Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho. I don't know which order, but those are the next five. So at least we have that figured out. It makes my life a little bit easier. I used to do a poll, but the polls were hard just because naturally, as I filter through the material, I kind of find corresponding states. Like again, as I've mentioned before, a lot of these states or territories, especially in the early 1800s, and you'll see this from time to time when I cover an article. It'll mention territories and or states, or I'll have dug deeper into a specific area and realized, okay, after this article, 4 or 5 years after this article, and the state boundaries changed, or um, Oregon was massive. Oregon territory was humongous. So there was stuff going all the way into Nevada, Idaho. Um, so obviously, people can be a little bit stickly about defining state boundary lines, but you have to understand when you're going back to the 1500s or 1800s, there's going to be a lot of that overlap. And there was here in Nebraska, there was quite a lot. Um, Dakota territory, as well as Nebraska, was quite large. And what is Wyoming was a considerable part of Nebraska. And Dakota territory as well. Obviously, North and South were one, so on and so forth. But details. Um, but yeah, how's everybody doing? Idaho, the Gem State, maybe is what you meant to say. New Mexico. Yeah, I've already done New Mexico. Hopefully, you've seen that one. It's one of my favorites. New Mexico is a crazy one. Um, yeah, I'm pretty proud of all that states, to be honest. I think as soon as you think less of a state, I've mentioned before that Wyoming and Montana and Idaho are going to be a little more difficult than the other ones just because territory and boundary lines were the latest defined amongst those three, the kind of that central area. Um, but yeah, they're all a challenge, and I like the challenge of it all. Um, long videos are the best. Well, I'm glad you feel that way. Not everyone does, that's for sure. Um, yeah. So what else? I think that's it. Let's just get into the material. Um, so again, as I've mentioned before, we're going to follow along with the threads that I post on X. I just find that helps me kind of keep um, a similar format for the episodes, and for me as well, just as a kind of the thought experiment as I plan out these things over the course of a week or a few weeks. It makes it easier for me. People can go back. I'll share the link in the description, and people can read the articles at their own leisure, pause the YouTube video, of course, or whatever. And um, I didn't share pictures a lot in the early episodes, and I felt like that was detrimental because there's so many great photographs and drawings. And as I've started to warp other ideas into these episodes, asylums and schools and constructions and populations and all the things that come along with that mystery in itself, this whole YouTube channel could just be about old world construction. And that would, that's 20 years worth of material right there, right? Anomalous America could just be about asylums. Like I could easily talk for 2 hours every week or two about asylums in every state, and Nebraska is no different. The largest buildings by square footage and rooms volume are always asylums in every single state. That's a big red flag to me, obviously. But yeah, Longo, good to see you, brother. Dude, I was just reading an article from Florida that you would love as I was putting this material together. somehow got mixed up in my Nebraska stuff. Um, Incredible mining operation. When you think Florida, you don't think of mining, but they found this island in the middle of a lake. Pretty crazy one. Sherry, wow, it's been a long time. Thanks for being here. Um, but yeah, so again, just sharing more pictures, like all that stuff. But yeah, so let's just share screen here and get into it. There's gonna be a few long reads in this one, and I think they're definitely worth it. Um, but yeah, as always, here we go. Sharing screen time. Again, thanks for joining me Monday. Hope everyone's having a great summer. Let's get me out of here. How do I make that full screen? I don't know. It's frustrating. Anyways, so yeah, like always, we're gonna follow this format. Gonna show some interesting stuff here. Trans Mississippi International Exposition. Now, a long, long time ago, I got in a kind of an interesting argument with a few of the kind of quote Tartary people, because I was showing some really cool construction photos. Obviously, I don't agree with that every building and city was built thousands of years ago and was repurposed, and these are all stone buildings. In fact, I said that there's quite a lot of evidence to support that these constructions were all thrown up relatively rapidly and that they weren't all stone. Certainly, there were some stone buildings, but the majority of them were wood framed. But yeah, this is like some of the first uh, big name YouTube altercations and bands I got were talking about this exact exposition, funny enough, but still beautiful nonetheless. This whole promenade, though, is all wood. It's all wood framed. Still incredible. I'm going to pull up a website and see if I can find some of these pictures I posted a long time ago. There's so many on here. This is called transmississippi.unl.edu. There are literally thousands of pictures on here for anybody who's interested and wants to go look through all this stuff on your own. Uh, there's some construction ones, though. Give me a second. Wood framed, again, quite grainy, taken with a grain of salt, and I'm sure many of you will, but you can see the wood framing of many of these. There are plenty of big ones that they don't have any of these images for, which I think is a little interesting. When you have thousands and thousands of photos taken of something. Like the government building, they have no construction photos of. In fact, this is labeled as a construction photo, but it isn't one. But anyways, again, this is Trans Mississippi .unl.edu if you want to go through this on your own. It's like I said, it's broken up by it's just crazy. Probably 2,000 photos at least. Memorabilia and everything. This is an incredibly well put together website. You don't get these for every state, so it's pretty special. But yeah, moving on. Bird's eye views of cities. Kearney. The usual crazy building here and there. Some of these bird's eye views, they highlight some of these wonderful buildings. Others, it's quite difficult to see. And I'm sure for you guys watching along at home, it's not the easiest to see these images, but you just have these standout buildings. Nebraska City and Omaha. This was another one of those special states like Seattle, for those of you that have seen Washington, episode 2. Yeah, episode 2. I talked about the grading of Seattle and how much of that made absolutely no sense, and the sheer amount of money and material removed just so they could get an even level and remove the hill. How ridiculous it is. You know, take my home city for example, Portland. Um, there was a really big. Um, they wanted to do the same thing here. There's a huge hill that separates Portland from the western part of the state. Portland is kind of boxed in by the river and hills, and they wanted to grade the hills. And it was another one of those situations of bankrupting the city for quite interesting construction plans. But um, in the Seattle one, I talked about how it was quite obvious to me that they were digging out the bottoms. There were plenty of buildings that were below ground. Um, Here's the church where obviously you can see all the new stone. Plenty of people have postulated that this is all this color discolored because it was below ground, and then this is actually the foundation of the building. But there's quite a lot of photographs to support that this is all new construction. But why would you do this? There was an unbelievable amount of buildings where they had to add 3 or 4 stories onto this. Here's the downtown Capitol building. Quite interesting. When you grade something, you're always lowering the level of things, but this one was quite a bit different. They didn't lower the level of anything, and you would think for a building like this of this size, it has pretty interesting again stairs to the first level, even though it's the third or fourth level. This building has a huge underground parking structure. Um, so there's obviously several stories of this building below ground. So, and it's up, it's all slanted upwards. So, the logic there is kind of backwards, really. But still, the pictures are fantastic. Why is it doing this? There's a website. It doesn't have all of these. The Durham Museum. Again, if you guys want to go look at this stuff for yourselves and spend a little more time on it, I can't zoom in on this one. There's a lot of photos here. Like, this one of my favorites. Do I have this one posted? Yeah. I mean, look at the building in the background. Like, I mean, it's just like part of what makes me laugh the most, right? Um, just crazy. Also, like this one. It's hard to see. I know. Again, it's zoomed out and the quality isn't the best, but like you just get these glimpses of these. I mean, just again, I keep wanting to remind people of the numbers, the numbers, the numbers. Just the amount of money required to build these expositions and the reasons why, and the fact that 90% of the people visiting the expositions were out of towners. They weren't people moving there looking for work. It was like a, a vacation, which would be incredibly strange, especially when they were all over and, you know, 40 plus expositions in this time frame. But yeah, the grading, really interesting. None of it makes any sense. Um, in the Seattle ones, there were blatant representations of these hills that were being dug out of buildings that were at least 4 or 5 stories below street level. Um, when we get to Oklahoma, I believe it's Oklahoma. Maybe it's Kansas. There's another good grading state. It slips my mind. Obviously, there's been probably 5 or 6, I believe, in America, but at least well known. But we'll cover another one. But here's the other side of that church building. Great example of how much actual earth is removed. And look in the background. I mean, again, it's like that's the thing I love so much about um, these old photos, especially of these. I don't want to say shitty wooden structures, but when you have these absolutely stone behemoths in the background, it's quite a drastic comparison. But I don't want to spend too much time on this, although it's completely worth its own episode. This is probably my favorite picture. But yeah, if you're new to the grading subject, there's quite a few long form videos out there. There's a few on Seattle. I'm pretty sure I did a longer form video on the grading of Seattle. I think it was about an hour long. But yeah, 75 of you, welcome. Thanks for joining me. Mormons walked into Salt Lake City in 1847. Yeah, and I talk a lot about. Um, Again, check out the Utah video. They found all kinds of crazy stuff underground in Salt Lake City, and the temple there, uh, quite a sacred place. I think that was definitely something's missing in the timeline. It's gonna be up to you guys to fill in the gaps, but there just simply wasn't enough technology, resources, and labor to develop the United States in the time frame we were given. And one need only look at to simple things like this, but again, taking little things as a whole, kind of the whole point of doing the series is we're breaking things down into a more digestible state by state run, not only to appeal to the locals and you guys out there listening along to hear and look and see things you probably never thought about or seen in your own states, but other people's states, and then see the same kind of errors of way and bring to light these kind of ideas that nobody really thinks about. Again, one could um, focus solely their intent on just one or two of these subjects and make an entire 2 hour presentation on them. But I'm kind of cursed to try to squeeze as much as I can into these videos with what little time I have, and your time and mine is precious. So courthouses. Again, if you haven't seen how I do this, I just make a thread on X and I use it as a guide. Grand Island, Nebraska County Courthouse. I mean, there's like 12 courthouse buildings in Nebraska, and they're all pretty beautiful. Several stories. Lincoln Courthouse. Really wants me to read that article. Okay. Nebraska, the state capital, it went through 6 different buildings, either burnt down or taken down. I talked about this one a long time ago that many of the capitol buildings of our states um, were rebuilt 1, 2, or 3 times, and Nebraska had 6. So we'll highlight another little website here, Nebraska State Historical Society, in this article blog called Nebraska's 5 Capitals. They actually had 6. I was able to find one more. But yeah, pretty crazy. 1855. This one doesn't have a date. See, this is what's funny. Okay, so, and they don't list the date here on this one either. 1860 is what I remember if I had it in the thing. No. 1868. So yeah, one of these only was up for a year. I can't remember off the top of my head. Omaha newspapers ridiculed the state government's move to the tiny village of Lincoln. Nobody will ever go to Lincoln. Who does not go to the legislature, the lunatic asylum, the penitentiary, some of the state institutions? Again, this is kind of a funny thing to hear somebody saying this in the 1800s about these small towns. But again, these small towns, I mean, just the transportation. Here's a pretty interesting one with the construction. People have poked a lot of holes in the construction photos, but that's certainly not something I want to dive too deep into. There's a lot of anomalies in these photographs, so it's kind of up to you to come up to your own opinion. The 4th capital right here. I mean, just this thing is insane. I wish I had a better photo, but it was a monster. It was destroyed to build this, and I believe this was the tallest building in the world in 1928 for a few years. No, maybe not. Tallest Capitol building, but just look at this monster. It's still there today. 1928. Yeah, that wasn't the tallest building, but for the middle of nowhere, Nebraska, it was quite the building. But yeah, six Capitol buildings. Pretty interesting. Universities. Between 1860 and 1890, so 30 years, there were 6 universities built, and they're all absolutely insane. And the amount of enrolled students in the first 10 years was so minuscule that it's just ridiculous to think of the funding and the necessity for such a drastic set of buildings. My home state's no different. U of O, Willamette, Corvallis. These are just some cities that have old universities, 1800s universities. You know, again, knowing what it was like growing up in this state and how desolate the majority of the state is or was, even 80s and 90s. You look at some of these photos of these towns that are in the middle of nowhere. I mean, Eugene and Corvallis on rivers, obviously very key, but the populations there were minuscule. And when you think of what was required, there weren't trains into any of these places yet. The the traveling alone just to get to your college for the year, it's like why are so many of them outside the city center? It's the same thing with the asylums. It's just like a lot of more questions than answers. But just look at this photo again. This is one of ultimately by the early 1910s, almost 10 universities in Nebraska, all the majority of which are very remote. Man, it really keeps opening that one. Some asylum photos. This is like the most requested topic for me so far is the asylum material. Um, right now my focus again is just to get through Anomalous America and kind of keep the train rolling, but I would love to dive deeper into the asylum material. But just look at this building. Largest building in Nebraska. Period. I never went farther than the early 1900s to try to find anything larger. But to again, we're in the mindset here, right? That I want to say 1800, 1880s, the state insane asylum was built, and this is the one down here. And to be the, the largest building by a staggering margin, and correlating the same concepts of what it takes to manage and run and build, right? It's not just the building. It's um a lot of these places, we're talking 50 to 100 documented. Again, I don't necessarily think we should follow the documented registry for the people that were institutionalized in this time frame. There's quite a lot of evidence out there to suggest it was quite a staggering number. Um, and record keeping, and you can't even trust the census. Why would you trust hospital records or asylum records? In fact, a lot of these places were uh, under quite a dark light for quite atrocious practices against people here. But again, an incredible building. And that's the thing too with the asylums is that in a lot of states they're still around. Just crazy to me. Abandoned. A lot of them are abandoned. All right. I think we'll stop there with the pictures. Where are we at? We're 30 or so minutes in. 75 of you in. Thanks again for spending your Monday night with me. Um, this article here, Mastodons in Nebraska. This was the preview episode um, that I put out a few days ago. So, for the sake of time, we're just going to highlight it. A cave containing prehistoric remains discovered near Shadron. Bones of animals 10 times as big as Jumbo, and birds that would make the American eagle appear like a swallow in comparison. Found in a cave a few miles out of Shadron, evidently the tomb of prehistoric animals who sought therein refuge from the flood. Much excitement has been created by the discovery of a great cave 10 miles from this city in what is called the Badlands. This cave contains prehistoric remains of petrifactions, the most valuable ever found, which go to establish the fact that giant men and animals. Remember, there's been quite a few discoveries just like this of several kinds of animals and men shoved into a cave through some kind of event. A flood seems the most likely, like being flushed down a toilet almost. Whether they were seeking refuge, man and beast, together in the same area, which is pretty incredible to think, or that just the natural topography of the area led to some kind of wave or something, funneling all of these different organisms into this cave. But I'm more likely to lean towards the latter, just because when you have like a tidal wave, so to say, and creatures all being funneled into us, they just get obliterated, blown to pieces. You know, like these mastodon um, burials they find in Alaska, where it's quite obvious that you had animals, hundreds, if not thousands of them, tumbling over large expanses of land and then to be buried, where they were basically dismembered. But in this cave, they go on to show that that's not the case at all, and either suffocated or drowned slowly or something along those lines. But again, to find man and beast together, pretty incredible. Pretty special. I only have like 3 or 4 like this. Colorado, there was one. Nevada, there was another. And I have 1 or 2 more as we get closer to the East Coast that we'll get into. But if you want more of this one, definitely check out the longer form video where I cover the whole thing and share some other correlations. But I'm just going to kind of read the highlighted stuff and move on. Plasma wave. Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Something crazy for sure. Lots of, the petrifaction nod is something I talk about a lot. So plasma seems to play a case for sure. We'll talk about more petrifactions in this video. The cave contained many zoological specimens heretofore unknown to the zoological world, as well as a skeleton and a petrifaction of prehistoric man, which are considered very valuable as they are the first of their kind ever found. Every known species of extinct animal are to be found in the cave, and several that we were never heard of before. Most of the animals that now exist were unknown at the time. The skeleton of this monster would indicate that he resembled very closely the elephant. So we'll talk about some more mastodon stuff here. Very interesting mastodon, a mastodon unlike one I've really ever seen before. But yeah, monster birds. It gets into 10-foot turtles. So not only are we talking about, they kind of hint at giant men, right? Pterodactyls, which I've kind of hinted at in other episodes, that the dragon we think of is more than likely the pterodactyl. And all kinds of stuff that's extinct, and megafauna-ish things, plant material that defies odds, that nothing like it is left on Earth today. But the 10-foot turtles, from California to here, we're finding the 10-foot turtles, 10 to 12, 15 feet even. I believe the biggest one they found was in the Dakotas. I believe it was in the Badlands, actually. So same region. 12-foot turtles, you imagine. But yeah, so again, like I said, you want the whole thing. I I would recommend the full length video. Another article I've talked a lot about, um, but resembles a again correlates nicely with a few of the other anomalous America states. I'm just going to read a few comments. Eugene. Oh, good. Another Oregon native. Thanks for being here. Just a sojourner. 414. Thanks again. And you're a member. Grateful. Thank you so much. Old power structures. I miss Oregon. In 831, moved from Pennsylvania to Bend, Oregon. Lived there until 97. 831. Am I missing? And 83. Got it. Yeah, you should see Bend, Oregon now. It's insane. Completely blown up. There are also bomb craters where cities used to be. Galapagos-sized turtles. I mean, way bigger than Galapagos. I mean, I have an image, an actual picture of one of these turtle shells, sea turtle shells, and it is like 2-story building size. 10-foot turtle, 75-foot human. Yeah, I mean, hard to say again, but I went to high school in Umatilla. Wow, Umatilla. Small world. Small town. I just drove through Umatilla like 2 months ago. It's crazy. Small town. I just got a bill in the mail for driving over the toll bridge there. I didn't realize it was a toll bridge. They just take a picture of your license and send you a bill. All right. Inside the Earth, 1875. A remarkable orifice underneath Ponca, compared to which the Mammoth Cave is a mere puncture in the ground. We published today an article from the Ponca Journal which has a decidedly fishy ring. It is all about a gold seeker who found a cave near Ponca and went down into the bowels of the earth, 1,500 feet from the surface, and there discovered a continuation of the cavern, miles in extent, 800 feet high, and filled with a standing, petrified forest. Besides the petrified forms of prehistoric human beings and animals. If this is all true, Ponca has a fortune in this cave, but the like has never been seen either upon the earth or under the earth. If it is not true, the fellow who found it should be speedily tied up in cross tree of a telegraph pole. When he had passed the distance of 1,300 paces down this precipice path, he estimated that he was taking into consideration his rapid descent not less than 800 feet below the surface of the cavern of the mound builders. So, unfortunately, I dug further and didn't find much more information about this. It's not the first time they found a cave under a mound system. As I've kind of talked about before, the mounds, plenty of them are burials. Many of them are buildings. Many of the buildings have cavern systems underneath them. Again, I've talked a lot about St. Louis and Cahokia. There were tunnels going underneath all the mound systems in that region. Miles and miles of them. So, again, if I was reading this article and had no other material to kind of base the validity off of, obviously I would say, that this has a fishy ring to it, just as this author stated to writing this miner's story down, but it correlates quite nicely with 5 or 6 other articles now that we've covered, even more than that now. I think we're over 10 tunnels under mounds that go into cave systems. So tapping into this kind of organic cave structure system with man-made cave and tavern systems that connect again with the mound systems. I talked about in the American Southwest that many from the Hopi and a few other tribes said there was a race of giants, advanced race of giants that built pyramids as vaults. Their exact words, vaults or doorways into the earth to survive floods. I think it was probably a multiple thing, not just floods, but any kind of cataclysmic event. And this isn't just one group of people saying this. They just about all of them discuss an advanced race of people that predated their ancestors that built all kinds of crazy things throughout the realm. And between war and famine and uh, events, some say, biblical events, the flood, others say fire. And, but yeah, so again, rapid descent not less than 800 feet below the cavern of the mound builders. The way became a little less sharp, although still descending with much rapidity. At 1,000 paces more, he was at least 1,500 feet below the surface of the earth. At this point, he emerged from the narrow crevice into a cavern of the most tremendous size. A cavern, as shown by his further explorations, the roof of which is from 800 to 400 feet in height and extending for miles and miles in every direction. This sounds a lot like Nevada. The I'd say Nevada and New Mexico, without a doubt, had the most articles about the underground worlds that inhabited those regions. Um, they talked about hundreds of miles in New Mexico, hundreds of miles. In fact, they discovered a labyrinth in New Mexico, and the article, I have a video on it. Check it out. What was it, Homer's Labyrinth in America, I believe is the title of the video. If any of you, Sherry, or anybody, don't mind finding that and linking that. Where they found a labyrinth larger than the labyrinth in Egypt, below ground in New Mexico. But anyways, the cavern systems are everywhere, and kind of pivoting off the idea that military slowly started taking over these systems in the 20s and 30s, World War One, World War Two, and a lot of the kind of DUMBs, deep underground military base material, is based off of these old world structures that have existed for God knows how long. I have no way of saying, but I would say quite a long time. Again, we're talking the natives, 1800s, 1700s, Native Americans. Their forefathers knew of these realms, and again, everyone's familiar with the Hopi and the Ant people, but they're not the only ones. Almost all of these tribes had stories of coming from below Earth. That their historical mythos is that they came from the underground to the surface. But yeah, um, so yeah, he emerged into a cavern 400 to 800 feet in height and extending for miles. The further narration in his discoveries of petrified trees, animals in this cavern floor, of which is remote ages appears to have been the surface of the earth. We are compelled to differ. Yep. So they say they go into it. But the article says they'll go into it more, but unfortunately, this is the last that I ever found. The cavern is the shape oblong, 47 paces in length and 20 paces in width. Mr. Wallace at first supposed he was the first person who had ever visited this subterranean solitude, but on examination, he found to his great astonishment that he was mistaken. In the center of the cavern, he found a large square block of stone, 12 feet high and about the same in length and breadth, on one side of which steps evidently cut by human hands led to the top. Mr. Wallace ascended and found a smooth platform, near the center of which was a square hole cut 4 feet deep and doubled in length and breadth, the sides of which were evenly and smoothly cut, the marks of a chisel being plainly discernible. At the bottom of the hole, he saw a large number of pieces of pottery similar to those found near the ancient mounds already mentioned. Also, he noticed several fragments of human bones and a skull, all which appeared charred by fire. These bones were, however, all petrified and turned to stone. Some kind of altar, perhaps? I mean, so many altars now below ground they find that I've shown through these posts. So yeah, one of my favorites for sure. 95 of you. Everyone's slowly trickling in. Let's get over that 100 mark. Appreciate you guys being here. So far, for those of you just getting in here, we've kind of covered the same old format. I showed the Trans-Mississippi International Exposition, some bird's eye views. I talked about the grading of Omaha. That in itself is worth an entire episode. Uh, the Nebraska had 6 different Capitol buildings. Again, considering the time, labor, and populace, it's crazy situation, let alone all the other things we talked about. The mastodons in Nebraska, the one of the craziest cave findings articles that I've ever covered. Um, Ancient miners. Now, one of these I wanted to transition into a full length PDF just because it overlapped quite nicely. La, la, la. Coins, ancient miners. Well, we'll do that one next. Okay, this one is huge, so I'm just going to highlight some things here. Vegetable physiology is what this one's called. It's from 1854, and it kind of talks a little bit more about um, kind of what's inside the earth idea and what's below the ground, buried fossil record stuff like that. Oh, thanks to donation. Hey man, glad you're back. I'm late but happy to catch you live. Thanks for the donation. Really appreciate it. I'm glad you're here too. I appreciate all of you for spending the Monday night with me. Listen to an old man ramble on, reading some old newspapers. So again, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm going to skip ahead. Okay. One of the most important ingredients in cultivated soil is phosphoric acid. Nearly one half the ash of wheat, corn, and other seeds consists of phosphoric acid in combination with lime, potash, and some other earthly bases. Without phosphoric acid, there can be no perfect seed. Without it, the grasses in our pastures fail to supply the bone forming principle of young and growing animals. The poorer and weary kinds of grasses may continue to grow in our old pastures and afford a good bite as to the quantity, but they are deficient in quality, especially in phosphate of lime and nitrogen, the bone and muscle forming principles of animals. These grasses, too, are equally destitute of some of the important ingredients. Milk. I believe in one of the Dakota episodes, I talked about how the Missouri River, obviously the Mississippi as well, have such high chemical uh, levels, mineral levels, especially in the 1800s, and especially the upper Missouri, and they contributed a lot of it to the insane, immense boneyards, the same, that had been washed over by the Missouri for a millennia, contributing to the incredible richness of these agricultural lands. But I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. In the territory of Nebraska, there is an extensive district or valley, some 30 miles in width and about 90 in length. It is a most desolate and sterile region and has been appropriately named the Badlands. In this barren district, there have recently been discovered, strewn in the great profusion, organic relics of extinct animals, and they disclose the former existence of the most remarkable races of animals that roamed over Nebraska high up in the valley of Missouri towards the sources of its western tributaries in bygone ages, long prior to the existence of the mammoth or mastodon. Out of the fossil remains collected from that region, not a single species has proved, after the most critical comparative anatomical examinations, to belong to any previously known species, either fossil or living. I mean, again, that's really a powerful statement there. And there is but one known genus in the collection, while most of the remains are in fact entirely new races, uniting in their anatomical structures, characters now found only in several distinct orders. Some of the extinct animals were of huge size. Nearly an entire skeleton of one was discovered, which measured, as it lay embedded, 18 feet in length and 9 feet in height. It is not our object here to describe the form, size, or peculiarities of the extinct races of animals that once swarmed in vast numbers in Nebraska, but rather to say something of the present state of these bones that have been so long been exposed to all the various changes of the seasons for thousands of years. There are well ascertained data from which the geologist can determine the relative ages of fossils, shells, bones, rocks, etc., with a much certainty as an astronomer, excuse me, can calculate an eclipse or the conjunction of certain stars. Now, to those who have not made geology a study, the above statement may seem not only startling but incredible. Nevertheless, it is true. From these well ascertained data, the fact is put beyond all cavil in the minds of geologists that at the time these singular animals roamed over the badlands of the upper Missouri, the configuration of our present continent was very different from what it is now. Europe and Asia were in fact no continents at all, being represented only by a few land islands scattered over a wide expanse of ocean. So this is really powerful because I talk about this in the Colorado episode a lot, but there was an ocean. The Gulf of Mexico essentially went all the way up into Canada and touched the Rockies. Or as, people have stated, the Rockies, were created in some kind of massive convulsion of the earth. But they find whale bones and shells and all kinds of shit on the highest mountains in the Rockies. And the lowlands are what we would call the lowlands. This area, the Badlands, it was the bottom of an ocean, or an ocean. And again, why all the crazy fossils they find in this region. And a big part of what I talk about on this channel is that I think that time frame is much closer to the human element than is given credit. And this idea that the northern latitudes were tropical, I say pretty much the whole realm was tropical. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that the same type of megafauna was growing in Antarctica and Alaska as it was on the equator. So, the seasons and all that as we know it today were drastically different. So obviously, it's not a big jump to say that the geology of the realm had changed quite drastically as well. This kind of ties back into the vapor canopy material. If that's a new term for you, then again, go check out my vapor canopy videos. Basically, the whole realm was blanketed by a large vapor canopy. Simple enough, and the oxygen levels were substantially higher, so man and beast were much larger. And so again, I'll keep reading. Where Asia and Europe were in fact no continents at all, being represented only by a few islands scattered over a wide expanse. So we know the ocean levels were substantially higher. Um, you know, whether we want to correlate this with an ice age or what, it's hard to say for sure, but the fingerprints of these things are found all over, and I touch on them in these episodes. The Atlantic seaboard of the United States back to the mountain ranges and up the valley of the Mississippi as high as Vicksburg was yet underwater. Mount Etna, that remarkable volcanic cone of Sicily, nearly 11,000 feet in height, was yet unformed. And the fertile plateau of that island, more than 100 miles in circumference, was still deep under the Mediterranean Sea. It is not within our province here to go into a disquisition of the facts by which geologists arrive at the starting conclusions just noticed, and of the others equally wonderful and true. Yes, thus it is that the geologist is able to prove as satisfactorily as he can be demonstrated a mathematical problem that at the time these fossil mammalia of Nebraska lived, the ocean still ebbed and flowed over Switzerland, including the present site of the Alps, whose highest summits and only could be reached above its surface, constituting a small archipelago, a few distant islands in the great expanse of the Tertiary Sea. Who among us can enumerate the days and months that have elapsed since these fossil skeletons of Nebraska were clothed in flesh and had the power of locomotion? Estimating the time by years, the numbers would be immeasurably great, utterly beyond the grasp of our conceptions to appreciate. And yet, these dry bones of old are still in such a perfect condition and present to so fresh an appearance that the light is reflected back from the enameled surface of the teeth with a much brilliancy as from highly polished steel. Were it not for their ponderous character and their strange physiognomy, one might well suppose them to be the bones of recent animals which had been bleached for a season. Recent bones contain about 44% of organic matter, fat, gelatin, etc., 50% of phosphate of lime, 4 or 5 of carbonate of lime, and some small portions of magnesia, soda, potash, and tray of fluorine, etc. The analysis of these fossil bones of Nebraska exhibit the changes they have undergone during the long period of internment. They contained only from 2 to 4% of their original organic matter and from 31 to 37% of the phosphate of lime. Now, again, remember what we were saying at the beginning of this article, how important the cyclical nature of everything is, that these beds of dead animals and the minerals, and how important that is to the crop yield in said region. It's not lost on me, the irony there. The gelatin of the bones has been partially removed and in its place supplied with mineral matter, as many of them are highly mineralized. Most of the bones and their fragments are in a relatively good state of preservation. I'm going to read one last paragraph here and then move on just because of its size. Researchers and discoveries in geology further afford us the most positive assurance that the American continent, from Bering Straits north all the way to the intermediate countries of South Patagonia, was once inhabited with huge but now extinct animals, monstrous in size, for the largest of the present race of our animals are but mere pygmies compared to them. The great number, if not all, of these extinct quadrupeds lived at a late period of the world's history, and long after the unique animals of Nebraska had ceased to be. For since the mammoth and mastodon lived, no very great change in the form of the land can have taken place. And it further appears from the character of the fossil remains in Europe and Asia, Australia, and North and South America, that those conditions which favor the life of the larger quadrupeds were lately, geologically speaking, coextensive with the world. What those conclusions were, no one can tell. Doubtless, one of those conditions were a warmer and more equitable temperature than we have now. Kind of exactly what I was saying. This person isn't going to go as far as to mention the vapor canopy here, but you correlate the megafauna, the oxygen levels, blah, 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 the worldwide universal plant growth, the same types of plants. Um, it's quite obvious to me, quite telling. Uh, in North America, we positively know they lived subsequent to the boulder or drift epoch, and yet they might have lived and died before man was created. At any rate, so let's take this little piece here because this is important. I think a big kind of puzzle piece for me has been antiquating that that's quite wrong, and that ancient man in all forms, giant, pygmy, dwarf, has been found side by side with all of these, even the monsters, even the really big ones. That last article that we read, the mastodons, the cave system where they found all of those things. They were, you know, their evidence was undeniable. It wasn't just large animals; it was large man, and they're side by side. And I have several of these now. So, I think people writing things like this, that's probably one of the more careful things, the delineation between biblical narrative and scientific. That even those two were separating themselves in the 1850s. Yet, however recent they may have appeared to the eye, these bones have in fact lain for more than 200 years in the situations where they are now found. So again, if we were reading an article like this in 1905, 1915, this person would say 250,000 years. So I can't reiterate how important just that is, right? So this person is saying, yet, however recent they may appear to the eyes, these bones have in fact lain for more than 200 years. That's a tiny fraction compared to the crazy numbers that come, just 10, 20 years after articles like this are written. Um, where they are now found, some upon the surface of the ground, others beneath it, and in ponds of water. And if they could remain so slightly changed for that period, we do not see why they may not have so continued for 10, 20, or more centuries. The bones of the mammoth, are, as found, are in their natural state, not mineralized. That's important. In December 1846, we spent a few days in Boston. While we were there, Dr. C.T. Jackson extracted from one of these large bones by pulverizing it and boiling it nearly a wine glass full of glue, apparently as strong and as fresh as it had been worked out of the bone of an ox just slaughtered. A portion of the soil in an arable district of Sweden, which from the immemorial had grown excellent wheat without manure, was found by Berzelius to contain minute fragments of bone, capable upon boiling with water to yield a weak solution of gelatin. Kind of again, full circle to what I was initially stating with the article, that there's no coincidence that the kind of breadbasket of America is built on top of a massive area of fossil beds. It was concluded, therefore, that the spot had been an ancient battlefield, and its prolonged fertility was due to the bones of old time buried in it, and still to some extent undecomposed. As there was no tradition or history of the battle, it undoubtedly was fought long before that of the Bangkok burn and Flodden field, perhaps contemporary with that of Thermopylae, and yet the organic part and gelatin of the bone still undecomposed. So yeah, this article goes on and on and on. So we're going to stop there, but I think you kind of get the idea. Good correlations there. Just pre the dinosaur epoch explanations, Paleozoic, right? Hundreds of thousands of years between periods. This guy saying that there couldn't be more than 200 years. And we'll pop back into this. Ancient miners. I have a full one for that. Which one's this one? More about ancient mines. Okay. Yeah, let's do some more animal stuff and we'll come back to the ancient mine. 106 of you, thanks for joining me. Episode 26, Nebraska, finally here. I'm doing it. I finally did it. Okay, more miners. Let's do petrifactions since we're covering petrified stuff. And we'll nail out the rest of the petrifaction stuff. Skeletons. Yeah, let's do that. So we'll cover petrifactions. We'll get into ancient miners, and we'll talk about cool tombs and stuff like that. Where are we at now? We are 1 hour in. We're going for 2 hours tonight. So we're going for one more hour. So I always feel like I need to speed up. Petrifactions is what we're going for. This is the latest in the way of prehistoric finds in Nebraska. The petrified arm of a prehistoric giant was unearthed recently on the farm of J.R. Mayle near Kearney, Nebraska. The hand was tightly clasped. A young son of Mr. Hale were playing with the curiosity, broke off the fingers of the hand, and 9 large diamonds fell out. J.D. Sullivan of Horton, Kansas, has received from a stone quarry in Nebraska the petrified head of a monster sea serpent, the bill of a huge sawfish, and the jawbone of a shark in which the teeth were all intact and bright as ebony. The eyes, glands, roots of the tongue, mouth, and lips of the serpent's head are very like the head of a large boa. I mean, just, again, why petrifactions are so important, right? It's the idea that you can have the eyes, the glands, the roots of the tongue. This isn't a skeleton. It weighs 15 pounds. The bill of the sawfish is 3 feet long, 3 inches wide, tapering down to a point and about half-inch thick. And on either side is a row of teeth 2 inches long and about 1 inch apart. I actually got a sawfish You can see it right behind me. Growing up, I had a neighbor who was from Korea, and she lived here just to go to school. And she brought me that from Korea. Soft, kind of sad because they're extinct or near extinct. This big, long, sword-like thing, but they were turned into weapons. Pretty cool. Good memory. Let's go back to full screen. Great excitement was created at Shadron, Nebraska, by the discovery of a petrified man about 2 miles north of that city, near Natural Wall, one of the great wonders of that region. The body was found by Ed. So again, Natural Wall, um, the Shadron area. I covered the Natural Wall stuff in that first article that we talked about, mastodons in Nebraska. As we go deeper into that article, we talk about the giant walls all over that region, and that the cave system looked to be part of a giant man-made structure with huge, huge walls. There's quite a few in that region. The body was found by Ed Rolsart, a well-known collector, while engaged in securing fossils. It is that of a man 6 feet tall, well developed, in a perfect state of preservation. It was found buried in butte clay and weighs over 500 pounds. The teeth are plainly visible, and the skull, head, and lips of those of a Negro. The finder of this was offered $2,000 cash for the specimen, but refused. This kind of reminds me of some of these other petrified curiosities. $2,000 in the 1800s is pretty incredible. And one of the articles, the man who found the curiosity said that he was waiting for a representative from the Smithsonian to come because they always paid the best. So everyone was holding out. The really good stuff. Everyone knew to wait for a representative from the Smithsonian because word would always reach them eventually, and they were paying top dollar. While delving for fossils in the Badlands of Nebraska a few days ago, a geologist unearthed a petrified human body. The petrifaction was discovered deeply embedded, but was taken out entire and almost perfect. Accounts say that the find has the. Oh, this is the same one I just read. And there's one more I want to cover here. Roman. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So a few more on the petrified relics. Where's we got the elephant? Yeah. We'll get back to the Twitter thread. Awesome. Rare bones. All right. This one is from 1923. That's about as recent as you get. Rare bones are unearthed in the Badlands. Let's zoom in a little bit more for you guys, since it only shows a segment of my shared screen. Fragmentary evidence of unclassified prehistoric rodents, reptiles, has been found by Albert Thompson, paleontologist, in the ranch lands of Nebraska, where in former years research workers have uncovered the remains of mastodons, rhinoceros, giant camels, alligators, dwarf horses, and other queer beasts. The bones of the strange animals were uncovered on a ranch in Sioux County, while Mr. Thompson, who is a member of the paleontological research staff of the American Museum of Natural History, was searching for skeletons of three-toed dwarf horses. Mr. Thompson began the study of paleontology while employed as a cowboy in the Dakota Badlands more than 30 years ago. He was especially interested in the remains of the three-toed horse and other types of beasts of the same family. In the interest of this work, he went to Nebraska early last summer. Aided by several students, he began digging in the channel bed that appeared to be rich in bones of all sorts. He found bits of the dwarf horse, of the alligator, and of other animals, and then he came upon pieces of skulls, the character of which was new to him. He delved further in an effort to uncover complete skeletons. His students, helpers returned to their schools, and he kept on alone, but had no further success. Bad weather finally set in, and Mr. Thompson was compelled to abandon his work. He had, however, collected hundreds of bones and skulls of great research value. He plans to return to Sayoo County next year and resume his work. Western Nebraska is undoubtedly in the richest field in America for this sort of work, said Mr. Thompson recently, and we hope to make startling discoveries in the next 2 or 3 years. I shall return next summer and make an effort to find complete skeletons of the strange type of rodents and reptiles of which we have fragments. Okay, we'll close that one so I know where I'm at. How's everybody doing? We'll talk a little bit about the subterranean ocean. Um, in Kentucky, we talked about 1,500 feet below the surface. They found a subterranean ocean with whales and mammals of several kinds. And in this one, and they postulated that for an ocean and these types of creatures to exist in this water, it must have uh, extended in an unbelievably large way. So good correlation there. This author goes as far as to say that this must exist under several states, Nebraska, Kansas, and others. I'm thinking it goes all the way to the Kentucky Ocean as well. We'll get into some mound builders. Can't forget about that. Story of Nebraska. This is a good one. That's a long one though. Okay. Some weird ones that stand out. If we cannot have the Platte River Canal, there still remains the chance for extracting electrical energy from the upper atmosphere by building an artificial mountain. An expert electrical engineer who has just returned to Chicago after an inspection of Pikes Peak proposes to locate a basic station on that mountain for tapping the clouds to secure electricity. According to this electrical engineer, it is only a question of time when Colorado will be supplied with power extracted from the upper atmosphere through the projection of magnets thrown from the earth. Now, this is really juicy because in my radium work, I show how they were using magnets in Colorado specifically because they found that the radium levels were so high in Colorado that you can measure it in the atmosphere, that you could actually register it. The atmosphere was so partically charged with the material, and they were doing all kinds of antenna experiments. And this is kind of, I think I titled the video Antiquitech something. Yeah, just this one stands out. Just kind of an odd one. Doesn't necessarily follow the typical anomalous guideline here, but I just thought it was interesting. This idea of harnessing electrical energy from the upper atmosphere, especially the fact it's in Colorado, because I've already covered the fact that they knew the ionization of the air and the atmosphere in Colorado was higher than anywhere else in the world. I even postulated that the whole concept of Tesla moving to Colorado Springs had, he said it had something to do with the air, that had the air, the better air quality, right? He left the city. I think that this was kind of a nod to this. I've also shown that his experiments were kind of phasing towards more of the radium side of things, you know, whether you believe that Tesla was even a real person or not. But the literature we have on his experiments with the time he spent here or out there in Colorado, I think lends a lot of credence to that idea. All right. But some of the most eminent scientists believe that the Earth is the reservoir of all electrical energy generated by the Earth and the revolution around its own axis, while the atmosphere above the clouds is electrified by electricity drawn from the Earth. Instead of tapping the clouds for electrical currents with which to propel machinery, it may eventually prove more economical and practical to draw the power directly from the Earth. Well, really, it's both. That's the key to these buildings, as I've touched on before, that you need to have both, right? It's an anode and a cathode, you know, you have to have both systems. But altitude is important. We'll do one more here that kind of falls in that same category. Making rain by electricity. Contributor calls attention to magnetic connection of Earth and cloud, possibly way of relief for dry regions. Problem is to pierce the air stratum that separates the high floating moisture from the Earth below. In some of the western states, comprising what is known as the semi arid regions, including the western portions of the state of Nebraska, much attention has recently been given to the methods of soil culture and irrigation, owing to the fact that the rainfall is insufficient to produce and mature vegetation. It is a known fact that impendent rain clouds often form and are carried over these regions without meeting with the proper conditions to bring about the ultimate state of condensation from which rainfall might eventuate. In that portion of the West, there is a conspicuous absence of trees and vegetation of every kind, except that which is cultivated. Streams and bodies of water are widely separated, and both the absence of trees and bodies of water tend to beset the elements of the atmosphere in their final effort to synthesize. The unsaturated atmosphere between rain clouds and the earth forms on a large scale a Franklin plate or condenser. The particles forming rain clouds, driven here and there by the wind, finally become heavily charged with positive electricity. The particles of vapor, being alike electrified, mutually repulse each other, and until a discharge is effected, either abrupt or gradually, further condensation is possible. Can nature be assisted? I'm just going to read the highlighted parts for the sake of time. Again, you can read this full article in the thread if you're interested. Under present conditions, small drops of rain penetrate the dielectric strata only a short distance until they are again vaporized, and this rapid evaporation and condensation produces an increase and increases the charge of electricity. Lightning is said to have an electromotive force of 3.5 million volts and current strength of 14 million amps. This estimate, however, would not hold good in the semi arid regions where the resistance of the atmosphere is greater than that of the humid regions due to the greater thickness of the dielectric strata. And for this reason, a discharge which will liberate the particles forming rain clouds cannot, in many cases, be affected. The resistance of the atmosphere could be reduced materially in various ways. Where it is saturated by evaporation from streams and bodies of water, it is found to be, to a certain extent, a conductor of electricity. Trees, and especially tall forest trees containing oily matter, are very valuable conductors and are the seat of a continuous current of electricity at all times. A few trees of this kind, assisted by the evaporation from a stream or lake, would reduce the resistance between the rain clouds and the earth several 100,000 ohms. Now, this is important because I talked about in my California episode uh, that a lot of these giant trees were part of crystalline cave systems or crystalline structures in the root systems. And again, going to that kind of vapor canopy-esque idea and the higher oxygen levels, as well as a higher humidity level and a higher electrical charge level, would play some important role with the trees and the continuity of those things. And go back to the kind of idea of the giant trees, those mesa plateaus and all these regions where they have these buttes and things that look like tree stumps. I think those things were all critically important in that kind of idea of the vapor canopy. When you study rainforest systems of today, you'll find that they have a biological structure and kind of synthesis that I think mimics this grander idea of the vapor canopy, where you have a section of or region that has its own biodiversity and it's completely removed from anything outside of it or above it or below it. And the actual canopy of the rainforest creates this kind of separate world, and magnify this greatly to a much more drastic realm. And I think articles like this kind of help you imagine a kind of avatar-esque world or age. um, but yeah, so again, I'm fast forwarding. A little consideration of these facts would lead to the belief that the presence of lakes of water, which could be formed in the western part of Nebraska and Kansas by a systematic method of damming all draws and ravines, also trees of an oily substance, the taller the better. So I also talked about how they tests in the uh, early 1900s with trees and sap, and how they showed that the sap carried a large amount of electricity, and the sap being kind of the blood, the think of it like iron in the human body, um, had a very important role in cavitation, and how the tree drew water up to the highest points of its limbs. And um, but yeah, so I'm just gonna call that one good there as it goes on a little bit longer. But again, this one's called "Making Rain by Electricity." It's quite a long one, so if you want to read that one all the way through, um, but yeah, the giant tree. I like that one because it ties in with the concept of um, previous what the previous realms have looked like. Petrified prairie dogs. We'll sure do this one. This is a quick one. 136 view, 101 hour, 20 minutes in. We're going 2 hours tonight, everybody. Thanks again for being here. We're doing a horrible job of reading comments. Atmospheric rivers, absolutely. Oh, you caught alive. Thanks for being here. I'm happy to be back on. Glad I'm able to find time to do this. Summer's coming to an end. School's starting back up. It's been an incredibly busy summer, and it's only going to get busier. So take every moment I can to sit down and put stuff like this together for you guys. And as long as there's people out there that are still excited to to watch along with me, I'm grateful for it. I'm gonna do my best to keep it going. I appreciate that. I'm glad you love it. The world is going to be quite different post 2040 when the vapor canopy returns. Oh, well, first I've heard of that, Scooter. I'd love to see it. We are happy. I'm happy that you're happy. Some of the best stuff. I appreciate that very much. And, a big criticism I get is I don't do a good job of interacting with any of you guys. The whole point of doing lives is so I can do that. And yeah, I do a horrible job. Uh Glad some of the finders weren't sellouts. Yeah, me too. Did he say three-toed horses? He did, yeah. Yeah, the oldest horses in the world are found in America. We're told that the Spanish brought them here, and that's a bunch of nonsense. People were trading American horses all over the realm. Much love. Apologies for seeing this now. Oh, it's okay. For some reason, most people don't get my. Um, oh, Julian, geez, it's like a awesome reunion. So many of you I haven't seen in so long. Thank you so much. Thank you for your service. I appreciate you guys. Okay, so what do we got? Like I said, we got 30 minutes. So I really want to be smart here. I want to do this one. Right. We're gonna do this one. Sorry, let me just reorganize my thoughts here real quick and lay out how I want to do this. Okay, so we're gonna do the prairie dog one. And then I'm not gonna have time for this one. This will be a second video. Man, this was a good one. Ugh. This was supposed to be my preview video, a story of Nebraska written by nature and man. But that other article, the Mastodon, the ones of the all the things buried in the cave, was just too good. So maybe this will be a little post video, but it's just too long. This would take 30 minutes to put together, so we're not going to do that one. We already did the veg one. We got to do the ancient miners. We got to do the Roman coins. We got to do the Catholics. And the skull one is huge. So we're gonna kind of reorganize all this. We've done veg already. We're gonna save historical. We're gonna do miners, Roman coins, Catholic relics, maybe elephants. The ocean ones too. Bleh. There's always so much. There's never a problem material, is there? No. It's just a problem of not rambling. Oh, I want to do this one really quick just because it's something I've talked about before and it was super popular. And then I just never really spent a bunch of time diving into it. So in the 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, the idea of Quivera, this mythical land of golden cities. Well, in the 1800s, they committed to the idea that this was a real thing. The Spanish had come to Nebraska, and we're going to read an article about this here in a little bit, and that they were looking for this king, King Tartarux or Tartar Rex, king of the Tartars. So supposedly the king of the Tartars had a wealthy kingdom in this area. Nebraska kind of took it and went with it and ran with it and turned it into this celebration, which again, is there more to this story than, what Coronado had said or what had come to us in this time? But, the kind of Tartary connection is quite interesting. And they celebrated this holiday called the Carnival of the King of Tartary, which is interesting, right? King of Tartary. And the holiday was on July 4th. It's like, why would you pick the America's Day of Independence holiday as the Carnival of King Tartar Rex, which is interesting. Anyone that's heard me talk about Prester John, John the Red King, the, who people postulated he was the king of Katai, which I've shown in old maps that America was labeled the land of Katai. Anyways, I just thought this was interesting. Maybe it's something I'll dive into further, but they had the Carnival of the King in Louisiana, where they invited kings of Tartary. So interesting, weird old articles. It's like, what do we really make of this? But anyways, let's just read this real quick. The story of Tartar Rex and Coronado is old, and it comes down to us through the legends of the Indians and a fanciful and fragmentary efforts of the old Spanish historians, and has been dressed up and rewoven by the historians of a later day. It is a story of surpassing interest, full of dramatic possibilities, and above all, is the exclusive property of Nebraska and is especially of Lincoln. For Quivera, the fabled realm of this mighty Indian monarch, embraced the territory of which Lincoln is now the chief city. Coronado's visit to this king 350 years ago took him from the city of Mexico up along the mountain regions to where Santa Fe now stands, northwesterly across the plains of the Indian Territory, Kansas, and Nebraska, and landed him within a few miles of this city. Hence, it is especially appropriate that the carnival of the King Tartar Rex, or the King of Tartary, be held in the ancient capital of his city realm. Super interesting. I mean, there's another YouTuber, and I'm forgetting his name, who has an incredible series on Prester John, and so much of this overlaps. And there's been a few authors over the course of 100 years or so that have made kind of connections between is Prester John this King Tartar Rex, or who the real actual monarch that Coronado was looking for. It's hard to say, but again, considering kind of um, the things I dabble in on this journey that is Anomalous America, it definitely wouldn't be outrageous to say that you had a whole city of people that had this celebration for 50 or 75 years where instead of celebrating America's independence, they celebrated this King Tartarex, who was this noble in a land called Quivera. Um, so anyway, super interesting. Just wanted to touch on that. And we did the rec. Okay, now we can jump into the long stuff. Let's do, since we just did that one. Oh no. Okay, hold on. We gotta find this really special one that relates to that nicely. Give me a second here. We'll come back to that one. Here we go. Okay, so just kind of remember the thing I just read there. Skeletons of Spaniards encased in armor unearthed on a farm. O'Neill, Nebraska, December 15th. This article was from like 1869, I want to say. I can't remember exactly, something around there. An extraordinary discovery has been made here which bids fair to provoke a sensation of international proportions. The remains of a large number of human skeletons encased in armor of at least 200 years ago. Okay. Kind of in that same wheelhouse, right? This is 1850s ish, so 1650s have been unearthed at least 200 years. So 300 years would put, are these the Spaniards that were in search for the King Tartar, King Tartary, the King of Tartary here in Nebraska? Prester John. At the same time, an ancient fort constructed on architectural lines and exhibiting engineering skill that would have reflected credit upon the army corps of any engineering nation of the 15th century has been uncovered. This discovery was made by John Hammond of O'Neill on his ranch 10 miles northwest of here. He was digging a draining ditch of the time. At a depth of 7 feet, the workman found a wall of solid rock. Any mineral formation in the sandhills is so unusual as to be worth investigating, and the workman called Mr. Hammond's attention to the discovery. The mystery deepened with the attention bestowed upon it, for the rocks were found to be heavy cubes, skillfully prepared and cemented together to form a wall 10 feet high and 2 feet wide. The men had unearthed the queer old relic where the walls came together in rectangular formation, and it was uncovered for a distance of 15 feet in both directions. On the inside of the square was found the armored skeletons and several antiquated weapons. One of the pieces of armor was a helmet in remarkable state of preservation. Now, are these really Spaniards? I mean, can we really trust the story of Coronado? I don't know, but quite an interesting connection there with what I had just mentioned. 14 skeletons. That's a good one. Yeah, let's do that. 14 skeletons found 9 miles south of Nebraska City. Reuben Church, one of Oto's, sorry for the poor quality, it's even worse for me, farmers living about 9 miles south of the city near the Namala line, made a ghastly find a few days since while excavating for a cellar. It consisted of 14 skeletons of men, women, and children, all within a space of 20 square feet, all about 6 feet from the surface, and all with their heads to the west. It was thought at first that a substantial clue had been obtained to some terrible mystery, but reflection showed that the burials could not have been recent, as the place had been occupied and cultivated by Mr. Church for many years, and as the condition of the bones showed long exposure to the action of the earth. They were soft and crumbled quickly when the air reached them. In each skull was found 3 small stones, used perhaps to close the mouths and eyes of the dead. Again, not the first time we've seen the skulls with coins and crystals and stones over the eyes and the mouth, or just the eyes sometimes. The place was undoubtedly an Indian cemetery before this section was settled so long ago that nothing but the bare bones are left to tell the story. Um, okay. Monster skeleton. We're gonna skip that one. Yeah, skip. So again, I think that we're gonna break away right there from this. If you like this, again, check this out. The link will be in the description once we finish here, and you can just go through at your leisure, um, and read these full articles or look them up or do whatever you want to do with them. But for the sake of time, we're done with the thread here, and we're just going to be reading from some longer form PDFs. I want to do the ancient miners really quick before we do the skulls. And I had an ancient cities one, and I'm just like, what happened to that one? I have one more, but I can't remember where it is. I must have forgot to put it in here, which is frustrating. 134 of you. Thanks again. Welcome. We're down to the last half hour or so here. Man, where on earth? Hopefully I can remember, but at the end here, I need to go back and look through my PDF form really quick. There was one really important one I wanted to read. More about ancient mines. Quoted by the Nebraska City News of April 30th, 1859 from the Wyoming Telescope. Nebraska, although one of the youngest of the territories, has her signs of antiquity that will furnish material for many brilliant volumes and will put the most learned and experienced antiquarians and geologists to their brown studies to account for the strange and marvelous freaks of nature and art which appear in our new and flourishing territory. One of the most unaccountable of these signs of antiquity is found in our stone quarries in Wyoming and vicinity. So again, this is near kind of an undefined time in the border. Technically, although it's saying Wyoming and vicinity, it's in modern day Nebraska, western Nebraska, right on the border. It's like 6 miles from the border. I was able to dig into this and find a little more information about it. But in the second area that they talk about is Weeping Water Valley. About 4 feet above high water mark on the banks of the Missouri at our levee is a stratum of lime rock, 2.5 feet in thickness, and the top of it from one end of town to the other along the levee, near a mile in length. Its whole surface is literally filled up with the tracks of wild animals of various species and sizes, among which are the tracks of the mink, the otter, the fawn, the deer, the bear, the antelope, the buffalo, and various other species. These tracks are deeply embedded in the rock, many of them which are scored along by animals slipping along for several inches on what was then undoubtedly a smooth clay or soapstone, and the tracks are as plain as any fresh ones that are made in a similar substance. Immediately above this rock, there is a stratum of joint clay or soapstone about 6 inches thick, from a stratum of mixed soapstone about 1 foot or so in thickness, then a stratum of pure limestone 20 inches thick, then a stratum of clay, and above that a stratum of scaly, rotten limestone mixed with clay, above which the hill slopes gradually back to the summit. The height of over 100 feet from the top of the rock at a half-mile distance from the river, which bed of earth is composed of a stratum of tough clay. Next is a bed of pure sand, then a loam, and on the surface a black vegetable mold 3 feet deep of the richest fertility. This is that terra preta, black vegetable mold 3 feet deep of the richest fertility. Right? This is kind of that worldwide terra preta. It's not quite worldwide, but it's pretty darn close now. I think they found it on every continent so far. These tracks are not confined to the vicinity of the river, but wherever the same strata of rock is found, the same series of tracks are plainly imprinted. It will be seen by the foregoing that there are 4 strata of rock and over 100 feet of earth above this rock. Also, there are the fossil remains of the terrapin, the tortoise, the weasel, the prairie dog, the snake, the gopher, the mink, the badger, the otter, the snail, and many other species of animals and insects and many species of roots, together with shells undoubtedly of saltwater origin, deeply embedded in the solid rock and in the earth above the rock. These are all distinct and unmistakable. There has also been discovered by persons making excavations broken pieces of earthenware, iron, human bones, petrified buffalo horns, and many fossils closely resembling the sweet potato in formation. All of these remains have been found at a depth from 10 to 15 feet beneath the surface. The editor then propounds six very deep conundrums, which it is not likely that any of the subscribers answered, and continues. Another wonder in Nebraska is the ancient mines of Weeping Water Valley, which have lately been discovered. About 6 or 7 miles from Wyoming commences the most extensive operation of ancient mining that has ever been discovered on the continent of North America. For miles in extent, the whole country is literally torn up and thrown in the most fantastic and promiscuous ridges, hillocks, gutters, trenches, shafts, etc. There are the remains of furnaces, chimneys, stone walls, and earthen houses, the fragments of jugs, glass bottles, and many other things too numerous to mention. There have been rocks drilled and blasted, evidently with gunpowder, stone dressed with the hammer, and every evidence of these operations being carried on by civilized men and not by the savages that now prowl over the prairies and rove from place to place in the quest of game. Old California miners who have visited these mines say that it would perhaps cost millions of dollars to do the work that has been done there, and the appearance of the surface is similar to places of California where the miners have been at work. It is evident that these miners found something that would pay them for their labor, or they would not have toiled and labored to such vast extent. What the mineral was, it has not been fully ascertained yet. The general impression is that it was gold or silver, perhaps both, as Nebraska abounds in these metals. Remember what we were saying earlier about the seven cities of gold, Guevara. Okay, so they're basically saying the most extensive mining operation ever found is in this region. Is that a coincidence with the other things we just pointed out? I do not know, but very interesting. This last statement sounds queer, but in 1859, the gold fields of Colorado had just been discovered. Kansas and Nebraska extended to the Rocky Mountains. And it was commonly believed that the Cherry Creek diggings at Denver were in Nebraska. The editor closed by expressing his belief that South Nebraska will eventually be one of the greatest mining regions and the most celebrated for its antiquities of any part of the continent. So, an incredible statement by somebody with boots on the ground in 1859. No, pretty crazy. Okay. We talked about the Spaniards, so I don't want to do the skull. I want to do the skull. We'll do with the mounds, and the Catholic stuff we'll do together. We're gonna do 3 articles. Where are we at? 132 of you. Gracious, grateful for all of you. Thanks for being here again. 15 minutes left. This should be perfect. So yeah, again, since so many of you have joined since I started and I don't take enough breaks, I'm doing a review and preview series where I just try to go over 2 hours worth of episodes. It seems to be about 6 episodes or so, 5 to 6 in 2 hours. So I'm going to do a few of those. I'm going to try to do one a week. Just to break, 20 hours of material into 2 hours, at least 20 hours. People have been liking that. It's gotten about 3,000 views in just a few days. So that's pretty good for me. Not the views really dictate anything, but it tells me that my subscribers are liking more condensed material. And also throughout that series, I give people examples and where to find the longer form content, the longer form videos. Hopefully it gets those people to go back and watch the full episodes. Expect another one of those by the end of the week. there's at least one article I'm going to go back and do another, 10-15 minute video on from Nebraska. And then my plan is to have episode 27, Kansas, out by the 28th. My goal was to do it on the 24th, but that is my middle son's birthday. So those few days are going to be pretty tied up there, and then school starts. So that's going to be a busy week. So within 2-ish weeks, episode 27 will be out. Well, yeah, thanks again. Oh, I actually caught a live. Woot. Awesome. Glad you're here. I rarely been to San Diego, just drive through it. Brett. Brett's here. Good to see you, Brett. Tuning in from Kansas City. Robert, thanks for tuning in. Ryan Zem is the YouTuber. Oh, cool. Thanks, Anna. Thank you. Otep. Yeah. Yeah, Ryan. There's another one too. Ryan sounds familiar. 432. Love your work. Glad to be back. Thank you. Archaics has several great videos about the Crusades and Prester John. Yeah, nothing against Archaics. Unfortunately, he had some not very nice things to say about me and some people that I call friends, and it's just it's just an unfortunate situation. Yeah, anybody talking about Prester John, and he's done a lot of stuff on the Vapor Canopy too, which I love. So I wish him nothing but the best, but I don't think he feels the same way about me, which is unfortunate. But anyways, back to it. Okay, last two articles of the night, guys. Thank you again. We're winding down. Old Roman coin is found in Nebraska. Coined in 2nd or 3rd century before Christ. Was excavating for a silo. Now remember what we've already touched on. We've talked about Coronado coming here looking for the 7 cities of gold for the land of Guevara, and that the people of Lincoln, Nebraska had a celebration. Instead of celebrating America's independence on July 4th, they were celebrating their ancient king, King Tartar Rex, which means king of Tartary, the Tartar king. And they said that that's who Coronado was coming here to look for, and coming here to this ancient cities of gold. We just talked about the giant mining operation, larger than anything that ever seen in North America. We talked about the burial chamber where they found what they called, in their words, the burial tomb of Spaniards, with advanced European construction, large walls. Anyways, how a Roman coin of the 2nd or 3rd century before Christ came to be lying 13 feet below the unbroken surface of the Nebraska prairie is a question which Professor E.D.T. Spencer, head of the Department of Greek and at Grinnell College, is now trying to solve. The coin was found at Wilcox, Nebraska, during the process of excavation for a silo that was sent to Professor Spencer by Ruth Battelle, who graduated from Grinnell in 1916. The question of how and when this piece of Roman treasure found its way around the world to the middle western plains of North America is open for full and free speculation. Professor Spencer, after a careful study of the circumstance, has evolved a theory which he intends to incorporate into a magazine article which he will write concerning the episode. When this is published will depend on the time necessary to complete certain investigations, which is now conducting, and in the meantime, he prefers to keep the secret to himself. It has been rumored that a similar Roman coin was unearthed several years ago in South Dakota. Professor Spencer can find nothing out definite concerning the matter and is very desirous of obtaining any information about it. The coin is in a good state of preservation. It is made of copper and is the size of a $50, but much thinner. A small hole is punched at the top. On one side is presented the head of Mercury wearing his winged helmet, and on the other, a man in a 4-horse chariot or quadria. Beneath the chariot are inscribed the words Roma and Hanuki. The last, according to Professor Spencer, is the name of a Roman patrician family, and the coin is known as a family coin. Well, we've shown hundreds of Roman relics, quote unquote Roman relics, going all the way into Arizona. That's the most popular place. Unbelievable amounts of Roman relics were found in Arizona, California, all the way into Oregon. Roman coins have been found in almost every state now that we've done this. Just about. They found them in Alaska. Roman coins, Roman and Greek coins found in Alaska. So not a big jump, but interesting correlation. Last article of the night, maybe. I want to find one more. So after we do this, I'm going to try to find that last one. But this is about it here, guys. Relics of the Catholics. Interesting old curios unearthed in Nebraska. A silver crucifix believed to have once belonged to Friar Padilla, who worked among the Indians in the 16th century. 3 interesting curios recently unearthed in Nebraska, and each at least more than a century old, are attracting the attention of Catholic dignitaries in the United States. The 3 curios, a solid silver crucifix, a double-barred cross of iron, and a figure in stone, are now on exhibition at the State Historical Society Museum. The crucifix is believed to have once belonged to Friar Padilla, who was the first white priest to attempt alone the religious subjugation of the Indians of the plains. Padilla lived among the red men of Nebraska back in the 16th century, but after a time was killed. A crucifix was discovered a few months ago by a farmer while digging for a foundation on his farm 1 mile west of Orleans, Harlan County. It was in this section that tradition has it Padilla was murdered. It was found resting upon the collarbone of a skeleton. Father M.A. Shine, rector of the Lincoln Cathedral, has laid these facts before church authorities, and an effort will be made to learn if this is the grave of the friar, long sought by the church. It may have been given by the priest to a converted Indian, and it was upon his skeleton that it was found. But a priest would not likely give away probably the only silver crucifix he owned, and the bones are apparently those of not of an Indian. Again, they do stuff like this all the time. They're like, oh, there was once a friar. The only person it could possibly be was this friar, even though they have found hundreds of crucifixes. They found them in dozens of mounds. Dozens of burial mounds have had crosses and crucifixes in them, generally of copper, very rarely of silver or of gold, but they have been found. So of course they're going to jump on, this one guy was kind of in this area. But no, it's far from the realistic story I would assume there. The crucifix is handmade of silver. At the base appear a skull and crossbones. 2 letters on the top of a third are found at the top point. It is supposed that the letters INRI found on all the crosses was originally upon this one, but the first I is not visible. The N is upside down, and the last letter is almost worn away. The double-barred cross has been traced to the ownership of Pierre Dorson, once a religious worker among the Indians who was a member of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Dorian at the time had married an Indian squaw and acted as guide through much of the Northwest. In 1812, he was with another big expedition but wandered away. The cross is found on a grave at the top of a hill close by a towering cedar upon the trunk of which Orion is rudely carved. A little stone figure is about 4 inches in length and 2 in width. Casts of it have been made and sent all over the world, one being presented to Pope Pius. More than a century ago, the Omaha Indians maintained rude temples, in each of which they sacredly guarded what was known later as the shell of St. John. These temples were erected under the ministration of friars of those days, whose lives were spent among the Indians, and it is to discover if the records at Rome, any relics such as this, are to be found on a record made of them, that a cast was sent to the Vatican. Oh, okay. Almost there. Slowly losing some people. I'm just going to summarize this one because I've said this over and over throughout the history of this YouTube channel. And finally, we kind of have a really good representation of it, at least from a an excavation point of view. But the original Nebraska man was 7 feet high and powerful, but had a mighty small brain. I'm going to skip along again for the sake of time to kind of get to the part. I've covered skulls like this several times. In fact, the most prevalent example was the skeletons they found in the mounds in the Ohio region. Um, Many of them with sloping foreheads, very small brain cavities, long jaws. But yeah, the lowest type of prehistoric man that North America continent has ever produced has just been discovered. Several miles north of Omaha, buried in a so called Indian mound, antedating by thousands of years the famous Lansing Skull of Kansas, and has been estimated by scientists to be at least 150,000 years old. Now, listen to that number and how ridiculous it is. It gets better. The Gilder's Nebraska skull has startled the scientific men of the country, and they are flocking to the home of Robert F. Gilder in Omaha, where the skull and several other bones of this man, who lived before the glacial period, covered North America with a vast sheet of ice. Professor Henry Osborne of Columbia University, New York, and vice president of the American Museum of Natural History, was at a theater party in New York City last Tuesday night. A photograph of the newly discovered skull was handed him by a newspaperman with the request that he pass opinion on it. The first train leaving New York the next morning carried Osborne en route to investigate what he pronounced the lowest type of band ever discovered. Blah blah blah. Again, I'm going to skip through just for the sake of time. It is without doubt the lowest order of primitive man ever found on this continent, said he. When he, and a scientific man with a reputation born Osborne, makes a statement as firm as this one, it means something. Nebraska shows an extremely small brain with corresponding possibilities of the power of thought intermediate between primitive man and the lowest type of intellectually now known. When asked how does this skull compare with the Lansing skull estimated, Osborne said the skull antedates the skull by thousands of years. Skipping ahead. It is perfectly wonderful that any race of human beings could have such a small amount of intelligence. The jaw indicates tremendous crushing power. The teeth have been worn down through the process of grinding roots, nuts, and raw meat. The lower jaw protruded beyond the upper, and there is an abnormal development of the bottom of the both of them. Very strong jaws, big teeth, worn down, pretty common. As compared with the normal skull, shows a receding chin and forehead, abnormally large cheekbones, and a brain pan ridiculously small. But the man was a giant, nevertheless. From other bones found in the small mound, the man who owned that skull originally must have been nearly 7 feet high, despite the small head. His frame shows a muscular man with the strength of 2 ordinary men. Okay, here's the important takeaway right here. In the mound where the bones were found, Mr. Gilder first found 3 skulls and other bones of an intermediate race of men, a race whose skulls show them to be below the modern Indian in intelligence, but far above the Nebraska man in thinking power. While the archaeologists are pleased at the first discovery, the lower strata contained a find so much greater as so completely to overshadow the first. Several feet below the first burial, the bones of the 3 beings were found. Why the second burial took place over the bones of the first, the scientists cannot conjecture. These 3 skulls were of one class, showing that the Nebraska skull is not a freak, but really a type of man who lived in the day. The bodies had been encased in wet clay, which had been burned so that they would practically practically be sealed in case. This burnt clay had gradually disintegrated and begun to crumble. Several of the great institutions of learning in this country have written him for information and have asked for casts of the skull. So basically what they're saying is, again, they're saying this burial is 150,000 years old, but then they find another burial, a third underneath this one. So it's 3 burials on top of each other, which we've seen so many times. They're saying the middle burial has the oldest skull, even though there's another burial below it. How does that make any sense? This kind of correlates again with kind of like hybrid dwarf, pygmy, Tolkien-esque ideas of Middle Earth, and that I think there were different I don't want to, they're not hybrids, different types of humans. Not so long ago. And then they see a skull and they want to jump to these ridiculous timelines. But then they find, oh, there's actually a burial below this one, and it has normal skulls. Anyways, let's pause on the share screen. At the stage, there we go. We're gonna look for one more really quick. Again, thanks for tuning in, everybody. We're winding down. Episode 26 coming to an end. Oh man, where is it? This is frustrating. Okay, here it is. I don't have it saved. I have just an image of it pulled up, but I'm just going to read it really quick. June 26, 1872. Primitive city brought to light. Lynch, Nebraska. Dr. Earl H. Bell, University of Nebraska anthropologist, said today he and 8 students had unearthed near Lynch what probably was the largest prehistoric city in North America. Again, outside of Lynch, Nebraska, they unearthed what was probably the largest prehistoric city in North America. The primitive settlement was located beneath the shifting sands of an ancient desert. The anthropologist said the discovery indicated a Midwestern agricultural civilization that flourished possibly 4,000 years ago. The first excavations indicated the city was 3 miles long and half a mile wide. Large sections evidently were inhabited densely. Remains uncovered included carbonized ears of corn and beans. There are also pieces of pottery large enough to hold half a bushel of produce. Dr. Bell said a type of house hitherto unknown was also found. He believed it a forerunner of the subterranean houses common to later Nebraska civilizations. The nearby lowland was irrigated naturally by springs, and the highland to the north was a rich hunting ground. He said Dr. Bell's expedition is the first to enter the northeast Niobrara Valley, the largest prehistoric city in North America. That's a good place to end it. Well, there we are, guys. 130. Great number. Great way to end it. Make sure to follow along on social media. I'm trying to get back into posting on there regularly, sharing some of these clips and a lot of the ones that I don't have time to talk about. I'm going to go back through, like I already mentioned, and do a video on the story of Nebraska as written by Nature and Man. That's a good one. And yeah, review and preview, that's coming up into the week. Stay tuned for that. As always, thanks again for tuning in. Have a wonderful week. I'll see you guys soon. I appreciate you all very much. And, don't forget to leave a comment, ask a question, leave a statement. Tell me something about your state. But yeah, thanks again, guys. Till next time, have a wonderful night.